Uh, I welcome you all. Good afternoon, everyone, and happy summer solstice and happy yoga day to all of you. I am Pranay Kumar today, founder of this Archiloop India, Archiloop India team. Archiloop India initiative is a board with members Shashank Shekhar and Aditi Kumar. They are the co-founders of this organization. It's a non-government organization, and we are running a special series of webinar based on the experiences of emerging intellectuals progressing and pioneering in various fields of architecture and planning. Uh, this uh, this session is for developing a new school of thought, rephrasing a time-honored system in planning and architecture. And previously we have had four sessions. First one, which is on the urban management after COVID situation, and the next one was on universal accessibility series. That two were the international episodes, and after that we had architectural photography. That was a series hosted by, run by Sarth Khare. He was a architectural photographer based in Delhi. And another we had previously by Abira Bhattacharya. She is a curator, assistant curator at National Museum, New Delhi. So we are running all the young intellectuals. The motto of this organization is to provide new information to the new generation of the field of architecture and planning. So that is our motto, and the main objective is to raise awareness towards art and design, architecture, planning, and also culture and heritage of Indian subcontinent. Today we are heading towards a new chapter of our series, or say we are setting up a new milestone in the journey to contribute towards the education and raising awareness and understand the formation of urban, social, cultural, historic fabric of the society. So today we have with us architect Balaji. He is a associate professor, and Aditi will introduce him to yourself now. I I'm sure that you will be enjoying this event, and listening to Balaji sir is always a great pleasure for me also, and for the others on the panel also. So I hope you all will enjoy, and I welcome you, sir. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Thank you so much, Aditi. Now you can go ahead with his introduction and this session.
Thanks a lot, Pranay. Uh, am I audible to everyone?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to welcome everyone from Team Akilu. And as we all know, today's session focuses on research. So as soon as we hear the word research, a lot of questions pop up in our minds. To start with, say, what is research? How do we do research? What is the purpose of research? Are the few basic questions that we get as soon as we hear this word. So if we go by definition, research is the creation of new knowledge and the use of existing knowledge in a creative way so as to generate new concepts and methodologies and understandings. This could include the synthesis and analysis of previous researches to the extent that it leads to new and creative outcomes. Research is basically done for two purposes. If we say to understand the world around us, or maybe why things or processes work the way they do, and to understand the application of these processes. So, in other words, we can say that research is either pure research or applied research. But I do agree that all these things are easier said than done. So, the questions as to how do we do research, what is the process of doing research, and what are the tools and techniques for an effective research. So to answer all these questions, today we have architect Balaji sir with us, and he serves as an associate professor at Mysore School of Architecture in Karnataka. He is trained as an architect and conservator from Anna University and School of Architecture and Planning, New Delhi. His research interests include cultural landscapes and traditional knowledge systems. He has also contributed as a freelancer consultant to various projects in the interest of heritage, such as heritage impact assessment for Hyderabad golf course at Golconda, listing and documentation of historic buildings in Chennai, and energy audit studies for traditional Bengal industry in Firozabad, a few to mention. His prior assignments included his involvement in design projects such as resorts, commercial complexes, and office spaces in Delhi and the Kingdom of Bahrain. Prior to the current assignment, he has taught in reputed schools of architecture in Tamil Nadu and has served a term as the head of Department of Architecture in GIA, Kerala. As a part of his fellowship at SPA Bhopal, he has taught postgraduate courses in the Department of Conservation and has contributed to the conservation and research projects at the Center for Cultural Knowledge Systems. His published works include papers on cultural landscape, use of GIS landscape analysis, and discourse on aesthetics in architecture. He has been developing and conducting workshops on subjects such as site design, climatology, and heritage documentation for university teachers and students through various regional and national forums, including the Training and Research Center from Council of Architecture. And he's currently working on his research, which is the role of music in shaping cultural landscapes, a case of Kaveri Basin, towards his PhD from the School of Planning and Architecture, Bhopal. I extend a very warm welcome to you, sir, and I hope it's going to be an interesting and involving session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Pranay and Aditi. Thank you, Archiloop India team, for inviting me, for having me here, this opportunity. So I think without wasting further time, I'll just get into the presentation. I'll share it. Okay, my presentation is titled Research is My Right, Building a Nation of Knowledge. As the title itself could have informed you, that I will speak about research as everybody's right. The equity of research would be my sort of a focus for today's talk. Content would be structured as below. I'll first make a point about what is the central idea of today's talk, and I'll give you a little background to from where this whole point of view is coming from. Then this talk is mostly structured for young students or probably in their undergraduate education. Also, I will touch upon some points which may be useful for master students and people who are trying to enter into research. So at large, I will try and keep it to fundamentals of research, and I will touch upon the importance of why research is our common asset. Why should we not look at it as an isolated island, and why it is a common resource. Then I will give you a brief list of some resources for people who are interested to start jumping into research activities. So what are few resources, including books and softwares and web links which we can use. Then I will quickly talk about some dissemination measures which we should take in research. That is going to be, in a nutshell, my talk today. So I'll start with an important quote by John F. Kennedy. All of us do not have equal talent, but all of us should have an equal opportunity to develop these talents. Now, this quote is very interesting. While it says all of us do not have equal talent, which is sort of a natural law, we may have multiple talents which are different in directions. But denying equal opportunity is a bigger threat to development of human society, is what I believe. That is what is iterated in the quote. And Abdul Kalam has also reiterated the same point in different words. Knowledge is a basic human right, says Dave Eggers. So knowledge is part of our right. We have right to claim knowledge, to know knowledge, also to produce knowledge. So it's a common property is something which we often forget when it comes to research and dissemination. Often we treat it like an isolated island. So today's talk is going to be centered around these areas of, I will touch upon themes which are related to these areas. Some disclaimer to begin with. Certainly, I'm not giving you an expert view because I myself is a beginner researcher. So this is not going to be some wisdom spread here. I am going to be talking like a colleague who will share his ideas with his co-colleagues and maybe students. That is going to be my viewpoint. Sort of, I'll share what I know. It's not really meant for established researchers who are a long time into research, but in some areas I'm trying to give some new resources which may be unfamiliar researchers. Some of them, not everything. I'm sure people are using very sophisticated methods and tools, but some of them may be useful. So you can stay back. And I request, if there are any established researchers attending the talk, I kindly request your feedback as well, so that it is useful for myself and the other participants. So the central idea of today's talk is going to be around equity concerns in research. Though I will talk about what is research in a very fundamental manner, I'll touch upon themes of equity. Also, to encourage everybody to hone research attitude. Research is not, according to me, it is not an isolated activity. It should rather become a part of our life. It should become central to our education. Critical thinking and research attitude should become central to our education rather than being a allied activity. Some background of what we are talking about. The moment we hear the word research, we often remember imageries of laboratories, aged scientists, mathematical formulae, and complex writings. Of course, not trying to underestimate the power of sophisticated science. Of course, everybody knows sophisticated science is very powerful, which is very essential for the progress of humanity. But it cannot become an excuse for not undertaking research. That is the whole point I'm trying to make. So if we go on saying research is all about sophisticated laboratory, I do not have a laboratory, so I will not do research, it is absolutely not correct. If we keep on saying I am still not aged enough to conduct research, I am very young, it is a false statement. Everybody in their own capacity, with the available resources, it is possible for each one of us to contribute to research activity in one manner or the other. It may not be a completely structured research we might do as research goes on in academia and laboratories, but everybody has an equal chance to contribute in their own capacity to various parts of research activity, which I will elaborate in further slides. So to give you some more background, how do we really measure research activity? We measure research activity by two important indicators. There are many indicators, of course, but two major indicators are research output in terms of publications, papers published, which is measured across the countries. And here are two sets of graph, which is showing you sort of India is already progressing in that line. We can see here India as a place in this graph there, right there. And it is progressing over the year. We have overall around 5% of increase in number of papers published. But then still, if you compare to the world countries, we are still in a lower position, which does not justify for, we cannot say we are not a developed nation, so we cannot conduct research. There are so many ways to get involved into research. So which is what we are going to sort of enter into and deliberate and give a thought today. The next measure, apart from publication, the other measure of research across global countries is filing of patents. Now, there are key differences between publication and patent application. Publication is an idea published in a written format. It can be an idea, it can be a summary of data, it can be your analysis, you can publish it in the form of paper. But patent is applied when it comes to inventions. If there is a working product, if there is a mechanism, if there is a machine, if there is a product you want to claim rights for, a patent is applied. So you can see this is another measure of research, where you can see patent applications filed all over the country. You can see India has a sort of a progressive, because we come under first 10 countries to have wider patent applications, but then still compared to global nations, we fall back big time below. So I think it's high time that having such a huge population in our country, human resource is just a kind of resource which cannot be compensated by any other resource. India has a wealth of human resource and we have wonderful education system. So we cannot, it is not justified that why India cannot go ahead and compete with world patent application. So increasing awareness among people, giving equal opportunity to every nook and corner of Indian villages to have access to research papers, to have access to research equipments, to have access to research tools is one of the key measures probably to open up research opportunities all over the country. So that's the point I was trying to make here. This is from the recent WIPO indicator report 2018, so which means it is a very reliable report. Let's get into some fundamentals before we discuss the elaborate tools and techniques. So what is research? This is mostly for people who have not entered into research yet, but aspirants who are trying to understand what research could be. We will talk generally about research today, not really specifically focusing on any particular domain, but at times I will try and give some examples which are from planning and architecture to just relate the crowd to. So what is research? As Aditi also mentioned in her beginning, when she introduced, research is systematic investigation to generate new knowledge. The keywords here are systematic. Research we all do in our everyday lives to find one or two new facts which we want for day-to-day living. If we want to dress up for a party appropriately, we go online and search for appropriate wear. If we want to buy a new car, we go online or to go to showrooms and then we try to figure out what can be best suitable for our needs. Though all of these can belong to the definition of research, but when we are talking about academic research, competitive research, serious research which we are trying to do, it is a very systematic investigation. So the first key to research is a detailed research design which is systematically prepared to answer fundamental questions. Why do we do it? Ultimately, to generate new knowledge. So it does not mean every time you have to produce something, you have to find something or discover something which will win you a Nobel Prize. But any small addition to existing domain of knowledge, even a small speck of extra knowledge, is also can also be claimed to be research. Second thing which we want to focus on when we talk about research, and often overlooked by younger communities especially, is the power of communication. There is no research until it is communicated. This point, I think everybody has to get it straight. How many ever years you spent in your research activity, finding new knowledge, interviewing people, collecting data, whatever you do, unless it is communicated to the public in the form of publication or in the form of some other form of dissemination activity, unless it is communicated, research is never complete. So as part of this talk, I would like to encourage all young students who are trying to enter into research to really strengthen their communication abilities in terms of systematic writing, technical writing. In this case, I don't mean communicate, does not mean really getting a very poetic and flowery language, but technical way of clearly communicating what you have discovered, what is the procedure used, how can somebody else also replicate the same procedure to gain new insights. So this skill is very essential for research. So research is complete only when there is communication. Research is always, there is no exception, it is always for larger benefit of humanity and progress. All research activities, irrespective of if it is done from within an academic institution or from a business enterprise or from government organization, non-government organization, irrespective of any of these differences, Research is always for larger benefit of humanity. Why am I highlighting this? Is because it is not the reality. Philosophically, we say it has to be for the benefit of humanity and for progress, but we see a lot of business going around research, which is not bad, but then holding the research findings to some within a particular organization, not disseminating it efficiently, giving free access to a community will hinder research. This is something which we often overlook. We don't see, we don't pay attention to. But then this is very important criteria. If you think about it, lot of education the tax, but when it goes into laboratories and research findings are reported, and it is published under expensive journals, the same citizen who have paid the tax money towards research has to again pay money to buy the same research and read it or access research data. This is very ironical. I mean, this is one point which we all should focus upon. If we don't have equal access to research data, tools, and free access to research, public research, humanity cannot progress further. One aspect how we should look at research, especially someone who is entering into research newly. What is the perspective you must have? You must think about it like a social network thread. Like, say, for example, on Twitter or Facebook, a thread is begun, and then you respond to it, someone else responds, and then we respond carrying the cues which is given by the previous responder, and then we continue communication. So we never say something in a thread which is discussing about, say, for example, national income. We don't discuss about something which is diagonally opposite to it. We don't discuss animation in that thread. We go and communicate in the respective threads. Similarly, if you scale it up to a very rigorous exercise, research also does a similar exercise. It is a continuous dialogue. So this is the reason why we find relevance and justification before we take up research exercise. Before we take up research exercise, just because a topic excites us, we don't jump into it and produce very rigorous research. We always see what is the need of the hour, what is the world talking about, what has been published before, what has been said in the research reports. Then we continue the thread. But how do we communicate? Unlike social network threads, we don't randomly post immediately to the previous post. We take up a previous cue from research papers, from other publications, from other platforms. We develop a whole research design to respond to it, rigorously conduct our research, which may have answer to what is being raised in the literature. Then we respond to it. So it is a very systematically and technically responded thread, if we want to call it that. It will be strengthened and more people contribute in their capacity. Why am I saying this? If there are only 10 people, imagine a topic is being discussed all over the world, which is of importance to this world, and only 10 people are responding. There are no variety of ideas. It is not strengthened. So if more and more people have equal access to research data and publication and labs, more and more people can contribute in their own capacity, small or large, then the whole process is strengthened. I want to introduce another concept of research cycle. So what is this whole cycle of research? What do we actually do when we say research? What do? We think and plan, we discover, we gather and analyze, write and publish, share and have impact, and the cycle continues. To elaborate this idea, some keywords which I have here are think and plan. We use literature. First, we need to see what has been done before. So literature, I cannot emphasize enough for the importance of literature study and for having domain knowledge. If somebody wants to research, say, landscape, he or she must have some domain knowledge and or must be willing to improve the domain knowledge and look at as many literature and publication as possible so that one can think and plan before we jump into what do we want to discover more, what one needs to contribute to more. I can't again emphasize more on data. data is central to any research. Without data, we almost cannot conduct any research because data is the one which informs us what is going on. If we don't have access to climate data, we can't really say anything confidently about climate. As simple as that. Suppose one is researching, say, native primitive community, a tribal community in, say, Toda Hills in Nilgiris. Now, if I don't have any data, if I'm going to talk about Nilgiris and the primitive tribes, all from the stories I have heard in my childhood, it is not going to be a research. I need to rigorously go and collect data in the form of interviews, in the form of photographs, in the form of mapping, as much as possible. Unless we do that, we cannot complete the research activity. So it will now data and analysis belongs to gather and analysis cycle of research. They will analyze to gain insights. Findings are important to make relevance of such an analysis. We report findings based on where we are going to use that insight. Suppose we want to conduct a quick research to understand the demographics of India and the employment opportunities. We don't communicate all the findings which tells us about demographics. If employment opportunity is our interest, even though if we have data about epidemics and diseases about the demography, we are not going to communicate that in that findings. So this is part of the step of research cycle where we write and publish relevant ideas, where we write and publish what is going to be fitting that cycle, fitting that population. Lastly, not all research ends, of course, in an application. As Aditi also mentioned in the beginning, there are two kinds of major classification of research which we bring into two major brackets. One is the pure research, other one is the applied research. There are many kinds of course, it's not an exhaustive, there are many kinds of research, but the basic categorization are two. Pure research is to find a fact or a discovery for the simple scientific curiosity of it. It contributes to the concept of a particular knowledge domain, but does not have an immediate applicability. Applied research is the other way around. To give you an example, when Einstein discovers E equals mc square, which is a popular example for all of us, he relates light and energy, matter and energy in one formula. It was with no intention of any product manufacture. So it's a pure research. If I want to research something, I want to see which is the glass which will help me optimize my energy within the house. Now there is a plan behind this that I will end of the research, I'm going to manufacture that particular glass. That falls under applied research. So depending upon what kind of research you do, the last step of the cycle would be to say whether there is an application to make a product out of it, or is there a mandate to take an action. Some of the research is called action research. Something is happening right now and we want to take action on it. Some violence, some kind of gender bias, which calls for an immediate action. So for example, right now we have a very good example of an action research which is going on globally of COVID-19. COVID-19 is a demanding situation now where we have to find a vaccine, we have to find a solution. Entire globe is trying to sort of look at a solution immediately. It is not a pure research. Finding a vaccine for COVID or another solution, alternative solution, is not a pure research at all. It's not even, let's say, it's not even just an applied research. It is an action research. It is waiting for an action to be implemented. So depending upon all these varieties of research, a research cycle can be completed and further research can be taken. Contributing, now the important point I want to make here at this slide is contributing to any of the above is contribution to research. Because most often we all think, how do I go through the entire cycle? I don't have a serious research facility around me. I don't have capacity to do it. I don't have funding. But whoever has in their capacity, to any of one step, if you contribute to this, suppose if you just click some photographs of heritage buildings around your locality and post it to one of the data forums, because simply because you have access to that monument where somebody else do not have. It is contributing to research because all that you have done is somebody who is sitting in the US or somebody is sitting in a very distant state of India wants to get a data, complete rich data about, say, heritage buildings of Tamil Nadu. He or she is not able to gather so much data. If you put a couple of images of your nearby monument and somebody else does the same thing, hundreds of people do it, it becomes a very rich data set. I'll show you some examples of how this can be done also. Even in my own research, I have used crowdsourced data. So even if you contribute a small photograph, it can contribute. But you need to find the right location to do it, right way of doing it. Now, quickly to tell you about, I don't want to get into technical about it. As an introduction, there are some 7 steps which we often talk about in research. Which is sort of organizing the earlier slide. Earlier slide was more conceptual. This is more serious one. Identifying the focus of research and asking a question, asking a research question. That is one of the fundamental thing. If you don't have a research question, there is no research following it. Then define the key terms which you want to answer, which is of immediate availability. Select a research method. That is one of the major important steps. If we ask the right question, if we have a focus, but if we do not select the right method, we are going to get wrong answers or insufficient answers sometimes. So that is not going to be helpful. Establish a sample population. Sampling is one of the ideas in research where if we want to research about very large universe, a very large population, then we cannot go and study every single member of the population. We sample some of them. Of course, today we have technology change, a major paradigm change of artificial intelligence and machine learning, in which we are trying to not go into sampling, but every data is automatically collected and all the data points are analyzed, which is another paradigm. So we have these paradigms which we can adopt. Gathering and analyzing data and interpreting results. These are 7 major steps known in research. Whatever kind of research we take up, these are the steps we. Now let's look at some of the criteria for quality research. What is a quality research? When we say research is of good quality or of bad quality, what do we mean? Some 5 criteria are very important to test the quality of your research. First one being validity. Are you using appropriate tools? Suppose I published a research paper in which I am trying to talk about land use optimization, or for example, relationship between land use and the community, for example. Now, how will anybody know is it of good quality or not? First test for that will be a check of what kind of tools and data and process I have used, which will be reported in the paper. So validity, that is, if it is not valid, then the whole paper becomes not very reliable. That is the first test of good quality. The second test of good quality of research is reliability. Is the publication, is your research demonstrating dependable qualities? The way we explain the research, if we have carried out some methods and if we have missed out some methods, some data collection, but we are in conclusion, if we are explaining our findings on that particular data which is missing, it is not very dependable. People will see that there is no data, but you are making conclusions on the data for which you don't have a data set. So it's not reliable. So it is our job as a researcher to express the reliability concerns of our research. We need to report it in such a manner, also conduct the research in such a manner that every step is taken care of, so that if somebody wants to test the reliability, it expresses itself as dependable. The third quality, which is sort of an extension of reliability, is replicability. You would also know if some research is reliable or not by testing its replicability. Can I repeat the steps of some research which was carried out in Japan? And if I repeat it for India, is it easy to repeat the exercise? Is all methods documented, all the data set documented? This is one of the tests for quality research. It should be replicable in most cases. Exceptions are there, of course. We are talking about the majority of quality research which comes under this umbrella. I'm not going into detail of all the exceptions which are to it. Largely, all research must be replicable in nature. Testability. We cannot research something which can never be tested with the available methods. For example, if I say very fundamental thing like red color, everybody sees red color as red color. This is a fundamental assumption which everybody knows. There is no way of testing it. You cannot test something, then there is no research. If you have tools and techniques with you which can be used to test your hypothesis, that is a criteria for good research. If it's not testable right now with the available technology, don't take it. Generalizability. After taking a sample, say 100 samples, and then I research these 100 samples for some criteria. Suppose I say, let me look into vernacular buildings and test if they are all going to be climate friendly, for example, from architecture. So if I'm going to take up, I cannot take up the sample from the entire universe of vernacular buildings. There are infinite number of them. If I take up hundreds of these vernacular buildings, sample them and test it, and if I make a theory out of it, how they respond to climate, if it is only generalizable to many other of the same population, because 100 sample we have picked up, if we scale it to the larger population of vernacular buildings, it should still be true. So generalizability is one of the criteria for research, not getting again into technical details of that. This is just for introduction. These are the 5 criteria. There is another concept which we have to focus called reasoning in research. There can be 3 major types of reasoning. Reasoning is our common sense. How do we reason something? If we want to prove something true, we have to reason. Otherwise, something cannot be proven true. So we can largely divide it into 3 categories. The first one is the inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is something where I test one sample. Say, for example, I look at a swan, bird swan, and I look, it is white in color. Then I say, okay, all swans are white in color. Then I look at 10 more swans. I find all of them are white in color. Then I deduce the idea. 10 different swans are 10 different data. So I deduce saying all of them have a common property. They are all white. Until that point, when I come across another swan, which is black in color, then I change my idea at that point when I get a new data. And then I say, no, all swans are not white in color. 1/3 of the swans are white. 3/4 of the swans are white in color. 1/4 can be black in color. Then if I go on to continue for the data until it is saturated, that I get same results, and then make a final theory. This is inductive reasoning. I look at data by data by data and then deduce. Deductive research is just the opposite of it. First, I assume, because of the existing norms or existing literature, I first state the hypothesis. This is going to be true. Then I test sample by sample whether it is true or not. When it comes out false, I change it. So first you go to the major idea and then test it with smaller data. This is the reverse of inductive reasoning called deductive reasoning. The third kind of reasoning is the very practical kind of reasoning because it deals with incomplete observation. It's called abductive reasoning. When in most cases, by the way, this is the truth, because in most of our cases, data, we don't have enough data. That is one of the key issues why I use this slide again, is because to inform you, as you assume, data is not in plenty. Data, producing data takes a lot of time. Cleaning the data takes a lot of time. It's ultimately data is short. As much data as we have, it is good. But even in the absence of data, we use certain methodology in research to do the best prediction possible. Say, for example, to get a little technical, we use a technique called Bayesian analysis, which is a statistical technique, which in the case of lack of data, it can do a best prediction. So there are ways and means to do it, but you need to know that data is short, and it's good that if every citizen in the country starts contributing a little by little to data. That is one of my key idea which I want to establish here. So let's take a look at another concept of research, which I think is one of the most important concepts in research, that all research is not same. We should not assume if I know one method, I can apply to all the research in this world. Absolutely not. This is an interesting idea in research that there are diversity in research and they are known as research paradigm. So depending upon the diversity in research, we used a different research paradigm and a different research design. What do I mean by this? The first point tells you logical, ethical, aesthetic, which is also summarized by the Venn diagram you see on the right hand side of the slide, where you can see truth, beauty, good. Truth is related to logical. All pure science, mathematics, all these subjects fall under truth because they are natural law. Blood is red, so human blood is red. Human blood is going to be red. Human blood has got composition of hemoglobin and etc. It's going to be like that. So soil composition, minerals, all of these are going to come under truth, natural laws. But there are some other category of subjects which are not natural law, which belong to sort of ethical and moral and social concerns of human beings. They are human made, but still are very relevant for research subjects. They are naturally not true, but then socially culturally true. We have some laws, we have social practices, we have economical practices. All of these come under good, which belongs to ethical or moral category. While there are some other category of subjects which do not fall under natural law, I mean, not as in science and maths, which do not fall under human made customs and norms, which falls under something which is a very unique phenomena in nature called aesthetic, beauty, which you don't decide logically you want to feel beautiful. You go to a scenic nature, look at a waterfall or a beautiful bird. You don't say, okay, these are the logic, step 1, step 2, step 3, that's why I should like it. You never say that. It just happens to us. These kind of phenomena fall under beauty. So these three requires a different paradigm of research. We cannot use the same methodology for all of them. Truth, for example, it's called, somebody is asking, is it similar to Vitruvian triad? Absolutely. That is why I think Vitruvian triad is one of the very important theory which was ever founded in 1st century BC, around BC to AD. Vitruvian triad also reflects a similar kind of an idea because all three are very different and our subjects may fall anywhere. So the truth, I was going to say, the methods used for scientific subjects are much more belonging to say mathematical idea, like statistics will be one of the key methodology, key tool used in those kind of research. While you may not use as much as statistics in the research of beauty, you may ask for opinion, you may take opinion polls of people. You may just play some video in front of children and observe their behaviors. This is a different way of doing research compared to how you test protein content in a particular food. When you're researching social norms and law, which falls under good, you don't use pretty much the similar techniques of what you use in researching art. You will use interviews, you will use various kind of other qualitative strategies where we use say techniques such as content analysis. I don't want to get into the details, but then these are the words, some of the words. We do sentiment analysis, we do content analysis. There are various techniques. So depending upon which paradigm, which subject domain you fall under, your paradigm differs. The point I'm trying to make here is architecture is a multidisciplinary research. It may fall anywhere in the center. And sometimes we talk about aesthetic of architecture. At the same time, we talk about what is the structural strength. At the same time, for the community. So somewhere in the center of this Venn diagram, to inclining at different times and different subjects, it inclines itself to closer to one of these sometimes. Not always right in the center, but sometimes inclined towards either of these three. But it will eventually, any subject you pick up related to architecture, it will eventually fall under this center of the Venn diagram. So you have to, the point I'm again trying to make here is, you cannot stick to one method. You can't say I am going to use statistics and find out all the truth about architecture. You cannot say I'll use content analysis and I'll find all the truth about architecture. So we need to be very creative and familiarize with all sorts of methodologies and try to mix and match. Creativity, yes, you heard me right. Creativity is very much part of research. We often tend to think creativity is only for artists. No, creativity is very much part of science. If we don't have creative application of tools, we can't get into new realms of knowledge. Then we have diversity of research based on what kind of data we are using. Are we using qualitative data? Are we using quantitative data? Are we using mixed data? Again, there are reflections of the same idea. Qualitative is to capture emotions, to capture colors, sizes and shapes, classifications, all the quantitative data, while quantitative are numbers, measures. These are quantitative data. Mixed can be mix of both. So what can be possible now? By this, people might be thinking, young people especially who are beginning their research, what could be some possible areas of research? Initially, I was so stupid. Yesterday, I was trying to generate a word cloud to try and see how many of these themes can come up, and I'll put it in the slide. But it was absolutely stupid because I think research areas are enormous and it is infinite. So I could not really put anything on this slide. I am just leaving it open to you, but then it can be opened up in the discussion time, where question answer session, where we can actually case by case basis we can discuss about it. It can range, to give you a quick picture, it can range anywhere from, say, discussion of styles of architecture, to history of architecture, to sciences of architecture such as structures, materials. It can be anything to do with sociology of architecture, human behavior and psychology of architecture. It can be n number of areas. It's again a creative venture to even find a topic which is of interest for architectural research. Let me tell you at this point, when it comes to mainstream research and funding and grants available for research, yet there is not much scope for so much of wide variety of research in architecture yet. It's not a very healthy environment, but then it is always all about that further it. So one of the points I'm trying to make in this presentation, by this time all of you know, is research is a common asset. Now that we know what is research roughly in a nutshell, research should be our common asset. The graphic you are seeing on the right hand side shows a funding cycle for research articles as it typically happens in any area, not just architecture. It can be true for many of the science related areas. So there is an announcement for a research funded project, RFP in short, what we call it as, mainly by government or some other big agency, and then specific research conducted within various research centers or laboratories. And then patent, if it is a product, a patent is filed first and then it is published. If it is not a product, if it is an idea, there are a series of publications in journals. Then comes the major step, copywriting. If you can see this symbol, it's a copyright symbol. Yeah, copyrighted, we often underestimate this whole process. The moment it is copyrighted with all rights reserved, many of this important research which another new researcher wants to look at simply cannot access because it is reserved. There are so many ways of releasing licenses which we often, because we are not aware of, we don't do. For example, Creative Commons license, which even though we hold copyright, even though somebody has to acknowledge me for my work, still I can release the work for public vision and public use under Creative license, which allows people to use the results and then develop from it without having to infringe my copyright. So which is an issue which we will talk a little later. And then it comes into closed published journals. Then libraries and expensive labs buys all the expensive journals, which are generally expensive. Every single person cannot afford to buy 5-10 journals. All of you know the expense of these closed journals. Then rights issues occur, and then scientific progress, because out of 100 researchers, only 2 research comes into public view. So people, without having to spend money for it, and scientific progress is poor and slow. This is one of the concerns we have to think about. Of course, there are also positives and negatives of opening up all the researchers, but it is a matter of deliberation. Access to research for everyone is fundamental, because access to knowledge is everybody's business, is everybody's right. Inquiry should be at the heart of education. Any education must promote people to inquire, research, and whatever small findings they have, it must be, via education system must encourage them to publish it. That is one of the, publish it if possible in the open educational resources, open publication platform. One of the things which we often forget is that, okay, most educated person can research people who are not cannot research. But we don't ask this question: what are the strength areas of all population? Are there any strength areas for young researchers? They may know, they may be exposed to new technologies. This may be a strength area. They may be, because of their accessibility into various communities. It can be, various people from various communities. Their access into certain communities can be their strength areas. Suppose I want to research a community, but I can't say more about them. Maybe because certain information I'm not allowed to seek because it is a taboo in that community. The community would not tell me because it's a taboo for them. Fair enough. We cannot steal information from a community, but somebody who is coming from the community has a lot of access to that information. If he or she decides to sensibly conduct a research and publish on that area, it is so useful for the entire humanity. So we should ask, what is the strength of me being young or me being experienced? What is the strength of me belonging to a particular community? What is the strength of me belonging to a particular gender? Is there a strength? I have some intuitions about that particular gender. So these are some questions we often fail to ask. I think that should be encouraged right from the education system. Research skills and tools are something which often comes up as a theme when we talk about research as a common asset for everybody. Are all skills and tools, are all research tools available to everybody? Sadly, no. But then we also at the same time forget there are so many open platforms and tools available, but still we don't pay attention to it. In this junction, I remember one of the speeches from our beloved Abdul Kalam, where he once said, how sad to see India still believes that only proprietary softwares and proprietary tools are the ones which can yield good results for Indian research community. He said once in his speech how we should encourage free tools, open tools, because free in this case is not, I'm not talking about free as in cost free. Many of these tools are cost free, but I'm talking about freedom, free as in freedom. So this is something which we often forget. If you just Google for free and open source tools, you will be flooded with information of how many platforms and tools are open for you, which by the end of when I get into the resources part of my presentation, I'll show you some of them. Shortage of document data and documentation. I have highlighted about this from the earlier slides that how much we are short of data. Only if people contribute, we will have data. So now I want, having understood the issues in research and having understood some basics of research, I really want to show very quickly some of the resources for anybody who wants to start at this point of time. If somebody wants to start, if you have this question in your mind, okay, I am an independent person or a student doing my undergrads or masters. Now, how do I start? Where do I start from? These resources might help you start, if not for conducting a sophisticated research, will help you get started. So first set of resources I would like to show you is to take up some free online courses. There is a concept called MOOC. I'm sure online open courses. There are numerous number of platforms like this. Harvard has its own. Indian government has several of such platforms. Yeah, Stanford has its own platform, edX and Coursera and so many. But I will show you only 4 of these courses, which will help you get started very comfortably. Apart from taking these courses, I am going to list down now on this slide. It is always, I cannot emphasize more on this, that it is always essential to strengthen your language and soft skills. Not just the research methods will, if you are very strong in research methods, but you cannot communicate to people through writing, through any other means of technical communication, it's going to hinder your progress in research. So parallelly, not everybody is good in their language, of course, in communication skill, including myself, but we all try and progress. We all try to strengthen it. This should be at the back of our head that we should parallelly strengthen our language and soft skills. Again, I can't emphasize more on how important the subject domain knowledge is also important. Suppose you are trying to become a researcher in architecture field or landscape field, just keep on always parallelly keep on strengthening your subject domain knowledge. How much ever you are good in research skills and language, you cannot intuitively come up with wonderful conclusions or make amazing contributions unless you are thorough with the subject knowledge. So I think these are some points I wanted to highlight. Now getting into the course itself, The first course I would like to suggest later, if you want, you can take screenshots at equal intervals, or later I can share this part of all the resources collectively. I can share as a PDF also, doesn't matter. So qualitative research methods and research writing by Professor Aradhna Malik is an amazing course to start with. It's available freely on our Indian MOOC platform called NPTEL. Of course, Swayam is a platform which will now allow you to register for currently going on ongoing courses. It is probably 8 weeks or 12 weeks courses. Easily you can enroll. But right now, this course is not going on. Right now, it is not an ongoing course. That's why I have given a link for an archived course set where you can find the earlier courses material which you can on your own pace you can learn. There are set of videos, video lectures, and there are set of transcripts available in this course. You can read through them and watch through in your own pace of time. This will introduce you to basic paradigms of research and basic ideas of qualitative research and fundamental idea of writing. The next course I would like to introduce is currently going on. In fact, the registration is on right now. If you guys can log on to Swayam portal and search for this course, or if you use this given link, you can go to this course and you will find an option to join. Somebody is saying Diksha. Absolutely, Diksha and NROER, all these platforms are available and more helpful for school education. Definitely, nevertheless, you will also find some courses on Diksha for other subjects as well, apart from schools. Now, what I'm showing you is some basic courses you can start with. The third course gets a little technical. This is called Introduction to Research by Professor Pratap Haridwas from IIT Madras. He's not the person conducting this course alone. He brings in a series of subject experts from various disciplines in this course, and then he largely gives an introduction to quantitative research. As against, unlike the Aradhna course which is conducted by Professor Aradhna Malik, this course goes more into quantitative aspects. But however, it also shows you some key tools which we can use for how we can organize our literature using some software tools such as JabRef. How can we analyze our writing, analyze our data? How can we write using some sophisticated software such as LaTeX? All these ideas are also well demonstrated in this course. On I understand all of are to statistics based for architect that is architecture and background. However, statistics is an amazing tool to do research, and sometimes we get wonderful insights. So it is always better to know at least the fundamental statistics. If you're interested in research, there is can't emphasize that at least you must have a fundamental knowledge of statistics. This course precisely does that. It gives you a fundamental knowledge. The next set of resources I would like to point to are series of books. Only 3 books to get you started with. If you're from architecture background, the first book, which is shown here, called Architectural Research Methods by Linda Groth and David Wong, is just an amazing book. I think it is one of its kind in the market. We don't find any other book which is comprehensively talking about architectural research methods. In this, you will find kinds of methods which are so unique to architecture. Because very often it is the practice, even in the mainstream architecture academia, it is the practice to use social research methods largely and then try to use it in architecture scenario. But what this book does is precisely to make a comparison and to also point out to some novel research methods such as simulation research, which are specific to architecture. One of the examples, if I want to quote in this regard from that book, is a wonderful method which we don't see in other research methods. There is a question of estimating the time taken by ancient Greeks when they built. We are talking about 1st century BC and 1st century AD, between that period. How would you estimate a wall is available in front of our eyes today? Greek wall we can see today, we can document it, we can estimate the properties of the wall. But if you want to ask a question of how it was built, how many people could have built it, how many days it could have taken for them to build, this is an amazing research question. But you can't really answer this using other social research methods. You need unique architectural research methods. In this book, you will see a demonstration. It was solved by a simulation research method. An experimental setup of people, a group of people were arranged to build the same wall with similar kind of part of the wall, not the entire wall. And then the time is estimated and number of people are estimated, and use some basic statistics to come to a conclusion. Approximately so many people would have built this wall across so many days. So which is a very unique method, and you will find n number of such methods in this book. That's an amazing book. Please go to it and look at it. The second book I want to point out is the Qualitative Research Methods Encyclopedia by Sage Encyclopedia series. It's part of that series. So this book is quite simply amazing for beginners, because there is also a soft copy version available online for this. If you want, you can browse and you can download a copy. Why it is good? Because it gives you takes a very complex research concept, and then it gives you a one pager or a two pager answer for that, not having to go through multiple papers of 9-10 pages and understand a method. This is like an encyclopedia of each concept. Each complex concept is explained very simply within 1 or 2 pages with a simple nice illustration, so quickly you can grasp some research concepts like that. So that is the reason why am I suggesting you to this resource. The third book, which I am also currently reading now, most of the book was very impressive to me. So far I have not finished the book yet, but it is amazing because there is someone here, David Spiegelhalter, who is trying to talk about statistics from a storytelling perspective. Because the moment we say statistics, especially for fine art researchers and architecture researchers, we get scared. Oh, these are full of numbers and overwhelming formulas. But here is one person who is telling you stories about statistics. He's telling you cases which he has handled and how he solved it, like a very storytelling manner, not getting too much technical about it, at the same time giving you an idea of the power of statistics. So I think it's a very good book to begin with if you're not from statistics background. Having said that, some scholarly research engines I want to point out too, because, of course, what I'm going to show you now is a series of search engines, not research engines, search engines, which we go for online search, which will never replace a good library, never ever replace a search engine search with a good library, but they are always complementary. But still, having in this age and era, having provided what we have today digitally, there are a lot of documents digitized. It is always a common assumption that Google has everything, which is not at all true, according to me, according to many experts. It's not true, because there is a major chunk of resource which you will find only in libraries. Definitely not in a Google search. If you are getting back to Google search, at least I will suggest you the following search engines, which I am going to list down. Do not go and search for a scholarly literature in Google search directly. Use some scholarly search engines such as Google Scholar. For the lack of time, I am not able to demonstrate each of these platforms one by one, which I would love to do in another occasion. But then you guys can go and search for these terminology, and you can find they are very resourceful. Instead of searching on Google, if you search on Google Scholar, it will yield you results which are published researchers, reliable researchers. It also has option to save your research papers into your own account. It has options to cite the resource. You can save the citation, you can download the citation, cite it in your paper. All these facilities are borrowed the citation into your reference manager. All these are possible. But it is not possible on Google search, which is also a mix of the results from Google. Regular Google search will yield you all sort of blogs, all sort of images, etc. So Google Scholar is a good medium. The second search engine I often go to is Microsoft Academic. Microsoft Academic is another search engine which pulls from around 120 million publications all around the world, which is an amazing resource. So please go to that. This project is a very interesting project, Wolfram Alpha. Though it is in its fundamental development stage, it is an amazing project. I am sure it will grow into accommodating multiple subject areas and all that. What it essentially does, it doesn't yield you, if you search anything in Wolfram Alpha, it won't yield you a series of pages unlike other search engines. If you ask a question, say for example, what is the use of golden ratio? It will quickly read through. Computational knowledge engine is what it is called. It will read through all the papers and give you the answers alone. What is essential for you. The same question you can go to Wolfram Alpha and type it online. If you type Wolfram Alpha, you will go to the page and then type the question and see what you get. It's amazing. It just, in a nutshell, it gives you the answer. Base search engine is another search engine which prides itself as one of the world's voluminous academic search engines. Of course, it has got a huge number of collection from scholarly writings. Go to it. Two of the Indian search engines I would really like to point out on this occasion is Shodh Ganga. There are numerous more. For the lack of time, I'm not getting into all of them. Shodh Ganga has a reservoir of Indian theses. So all the Indian research theses, doctoral theses are all mounted on Shodh Ganga. You can search through them. You can freely download, access them, read through them. This is wonderful resource for that. Shodh Gangotri is the research which is in proposals, which is not yet published, not yet finished as in PhD researches. Those theses you will find here in the form of abstracts. At least you will know that you are not repeating somebody else's work. At least you will know some kind of research which is going on right now. Some software I want to quickly point out. For lack of time, I think I'll just quickly run through it, not talking in detail about each one of them. There are all the software. What you must notice here is that all of the resources I am trying to give you here, including software and online platforms, they are all free in nature, free and open source. You don't have to pay a penny to use any of them. Tableau is a paid data visualizer package. If you buy a desktop version, it's amazing visualization it does. People like newspaper reporting like Hindu and Times and all these people also use Tableau. But what I am referring to you is not the Tableau desktop version. If you can afford, you can afford it. But Tableau Public is a public version, online version, where you can go and put in your data. And as you see on the right hand side, amazing visualization of data. In your work. So this is a free software and free data. Only thing they ask for is your data to be on. And then you can also see other data sets from online. So it is an open resource. QGIS is a GIS, Geographical Information System, which we also teach in our institution, which is again, there is one proprietary software available in the market called ArcGIS. There are so many others, but QGIS is a free version of it, and it's very powerful to do all geographical operations such as pulling out contours, studying watersheds, generating satellite analysis. So the image which you see on the right is also part of my research, where I was going around with cell phone to various points of interest where we have music schools and music performance centers in Mysore. And then all the data here which you see mapped are collected from cell phone and from cell phone directly into QGIS. And you can produce amazing statistics using this software, which is quite powerful. PSPP, an equivalent proprietary version, you have something called SPSS in the market, but PSPP is equivalent version which can produce all statistical operations free of cost. R is another free of cost software which does all kind of research outputs. You can do research calculations, plotting your data, geographical mapping of your data, and so many other things. It's very powerful. Grasshopper and Dynamo are with proprietary software called Rhino, and Dynamo is used with the proprietary software called Revit. So these, though they are used in combination with proprietary software, the tool themselves, these extensions are themselves open source, freely available. You can use it for research purposes, such as the one I am showing you on the right hand slide. There is a small visual code written to optimize the volume. The space, what is happening on your right hand side of this slide is the volume is not designed fixed. There is a code written to 3-4 parameters are fed in to see which of the parameter can optimize the volume of the spaces. Sometimes we ask research questions like this. Provided there is these parameters, what is the optimum volume which I should have for the building? So softwares like these can help you do such exercise. If you want it completely free, Blender is a 3D software in combination with Sverchok, which can also do similar operations like Grasshopper and Dynamo. SketchUp Make is often not given that importance of in research, where you can make 3D models. What you are seeing on the right hand side is 3D models produced by thousands of people across the world and put on the common platform of Google Earth and SketchUp 3D warehouse, wherein from researchers who are interested in those areas of interest can download these models and use it. What we don't realize is that we as students can also, from the comforts of our home, we can make these models. Bottom image from the right hand side of the slide shows a feature in SketchUp Make 2017 which is free. There you have an option called photo match. And then you can see these red and green handles on the photograph. Those are perspective bars. Once you align these perspective bars, you can draw on the photographs to scale 3D models, which is what is used by majority of people who produce these 3D models. They can be used not for very rigorous 3D model, very accurate 3D models, but at least to get a fundamental idea of a scaled 3D model. If imagine thousands of people around the world are making it and contributing to the open resource, we'll have a numerous amount of architectural information, which I encourage all students to also take up and do. GitHub is a repository of free and open source software. Please visit GitHub and find more about it. There are also reference managers. When we read literature, what we do traditionally is to mark using highlighters on the literature, keep it filed in a physical folder or in a digital folder. But you have also softwares which can very well manage this literature. You can highlight the notes, keep the notes, query the notes based on what you want to ask. So please use Mendeley is an excellent free software which can do it. Jabref is completely free, which can help you do it. I think I don't want to overwhelm you showing more softwares like that, but this is just for an idea. You don't have to really remember all these. You can in your own time research about them. Now, one more point I want to talk about is about crowdsourcing. I have been talking about it, that everybody contributing to data from all nooks and corners of the world is going to enrich data. An example of such a scenario here from heritage research, I want to point out why it is important. I myself is a conservation architect. I'm from heritage background. So it is also my work. This graph you're seeing is also part of my work. And what it highlights is that this particular graph shows how many of protected heritage properties we have from India, officially protected by government. We also have many other channels which are identifying monuments, but then these are the only officially protected ones. See, roughly you will see monuments of monuments of national importance is only roughly around 4,000. Again, state protected monuments are only again another 4,000. 4,000 properties for a country of India is just unrealistic and unjustified. This happens only because not many are involved in identifying, and crowdsourcing is not being a mainstream way of identifying heritage properties by Indian mechanism. It is identified by a handful of people. For the scale of our country, how many places you can access and how many such monuments can be identified. People should contribute. To see from India, we have only 34 cultural sites, 7 natural sites, 1 mixed site, and only 1 cultural landscape site from India as nominated to World Heritage Site, which is all of us know is very unrealistic and not really representative of what India has. India has so many numerous lakhs of properties which should have this status and protection, though it does not, because of lack of data is one of the key issues. There are so many others which I don't want to get into details, but lack of data is definitely one amongst them. So where can you crowdsource? Where can you go for looking into public data, and where can you freely and openly contribute data if you're interested? In this situation of lockdown, we can at least do this activity of whatever data we have in terms of photographs, in terms of small interviews, in audio recordings, video recordings, whatever data we have, or small data points in terms of maps which you have in Google Earth, we can all share it. So that is one of the activities we can all do, irrespective of whether we are students or established researchers. So some of those which I'll quickly run through is Mendeley Data is one open platform like that we can freely browse for data as well as contribute. Tableau public data we already saw. Apart from the Tableau software, there is also public database. Arches is a project which is initiated by Getty Conservation for heritage database. Elsevier data in brief is where you can write, you don't have to publish an entire paper of 9,000, 8,000 words. You can just write a small article of 1,000 or 800 words only about your data, publish only your data along with the data set. So you can do that. Open source data portals are available like CCAN. OpenStreetMap is a data source where you can share your building layouts and all that. You can map online your Bhuvan has products of satellite imagery, which we can use in our GIS processing. USGS is one another stream like that. Google Earth is another platform where we can contribute as well as take from. Google Trends. I mean, we often ignore a whole host of packages which Google offers. It's not always just Google. There is something called Google Trend, which tells us about the trends of research. Which there is a Google Analytics, which tells us about analysis. There is a Google data search. You can go to Google data search window and search for data across the world. You could go to Google Public Data Explorer and explore various data on land use, public toilet usage, etc., freely from Google Data Explorer. Google Patent is another forum where you can go and search for numerous patents filed around the world, so that you can see before making any invention or filing a patent, you can know what exists already. This is also part of my PhD thesis where I have used, this is just to show how powerful open source softwares are. All of these GIS and data points and streams and all statistical analysis, all these you see in this particular work is all done using free softwares and free source. Of course, most of this data is my original data collection, but then softwares for processing and analyzing, mapping, all that I have used free softwares. So it's just to give you a confidence on how powerful free software is. Don't hesitate using them, thinking that only proprietary softwares can do things for you. This is again done from free software. You can make complex operations. I don't want to get into details of what this is. Satellite imagery analysis. You can also find archaeological mounds from satellite imagery without having to going to the site using free software. You can use drone imagery, camera imagery to reconstruct a 3D model using again another free software called Meshroom. Meshroom is another free software. If you have a set of 300 photos or 100, 200 photographs, you can using the photographs, Meshroom can generate 3D model. So you can do it freely without having to pay a penny. So these are free data available on USGS database and other database like a tile you can download and really visualize on free software. You can visualize the 3D data. Of course, this database is not available for wide range of geographical spread. Right now, it is available for LiDAR data is available for America, largely parts of US, but it is freely accessible to us right now. Not long from now, it will be available for hopefully for India as well. This is again a structural analysis conducted out of a free software called Artemis model. It can help you do sophisticated structural analysis with very simple 3D models generated by you from home. So we often underestimate the potentials of free and open source softwares. So you can make use of these things. Lastly, before concluding, I want to talk about some concerns related to dissemination of research. Of course, in this platform, it is too early to talk about dissemination because dissemination is one of the last steps in serious systematic research. But when we are trying to contribute from our own capacity to database and other areas, we can also think about dissemination. The first thing is make yourself aware of publication. What publication? Don't scare away from publication. There are numerous resources out there online which is helpful for you to familiarizing yourself with publication procedures, how to do it. It is not at all scary once we get familiar with it. Please go through it and familiarize. Everybody, every single person must be aware of copyright and patent awareness. Especially when it comes to architecture college, we are so familiar how much your hard work, your entire hard work of making extremely sophisticated drawings and models and all sort of data is just let out into the public, and then without being aware of copyright. Even experienced architects sometimes are not aware of copyrights and patent. So I think every single person, citizen, must be aware of copyright and patent, because as soon as you produce the work, as soon as you draw a single sketch, by law, by nature, it acquires copyright. You don't even have to register it. But how to systematically handle and manage is something which everybody must learn. This is an entire topic for another session, I believe. So I leave it there. I ask you people to explore on that. Wiki platforms are available to openly share your thoughts. We all go to Wiki University, Wikidata, Wikipedia, all of these places. But then most of the time we read and we come out. So there is a controversy between Wiki and what scholarly people do. Still, there is a huge amount of information there. Everybody must know in your own capacity. You can also register freely and contribute to Wiki. You can do that by reading their homepage and reading the information on Wiki. All of you will know how to do it. Please go through it. OER Commons, Open Education Resource, is another platform where you can share open resource freely what you know and what you have. You can also access others' information, educational resources. The other thing I want to talk about this when it comes to dissemination is about languages. Very often we find English language publication. Sometimes we are so ignorant that there are other language publication which also is very progressive. Similarly, at the same time, there is a community which has knowledge, but then they can't read English. So I think somewhere language is a problem to access to research, because today we are talking about access to research, free access. Translation efforts must be undertaken. So people who are good at your own local language, you can also attempt for at least taking up the versions of papers or books which are in English and translate it to your local language, which is also a very important contribution to research arena. It is by per se, it is not by itself a research activity, but it is feeding into encouraging research activity, because people who cannot read certain research in one language, they can at least read from their own native language. I encourage people who are good at language to do that. Excessive data generated in schools of architecture can become a very important source for research, but most of the occasion we keep it to ourselves simply because of a lack of awareness that how to clean the data and where to give it and how to publish. Some awareness on that would also help. I leave it at that. So ultimately, having said that, please contribute. I would also like to say contribute responsibly. No, you can take a lot of data from online, but you have to be responsible before using it, because what findings we are going to make out of it is going to be shared with universal community. It has to be of benefit. Similarly, what you're going to give to the community should also be responsibly done. Don't be in a hurry for namesake. Don't give unclean data. Don't give random, inaccurate data. Please share responsibly. In this age and time, it is more relevant to say that, because we have a lot of platforms where so much of crowd sharing activity is happening. Cleaning data is a hectic job. Please be sensitive about it. Having said that, I would like to summarize what we have seen for today. I think I took a lot of time. Sorry for that. In summary, we had taken a look at introduction to research, very basic, fundamental, only for people who would like to start now. We looked at some significance of research, why research is important. We also discussed the equity concerns in access to research data and tools. We, of course, went through a list of resources, including books, web links, softwares, free and open source databases, etc. Lastly, we spoke about dissemination of research data. I would like to acknowledge in this occasion, I would like to thank Archiloop India team, Pranay and Aditi in particular, my home institution, Mysore School of Architecture, for their continued support and belief in me, allowing me to pursue what I want to. I would really like to thank my teachers with whose support and knowledge I am sharing today, my knowledge of research, because these teachers taught me research. Dr. Vishaka Kautekar, who is my research supervisor for PhD, Dr. Rachna Khare, who introduced me to research methods as a course, Dr. Shama Puntambekar and Dr. Kakoli Saha, who had been instrumental in introducing me to one of the important tool which I use for all of my research today, that is GIS, Geographical Information System. Having said that, I thank all of the participants today who have sat here patiently and listened to me for this long time. Thank you, all of you. Go to questions. Over to you, Pranay. Aditi.
Hello.
Yeah, Shashank. Can't hear.
Hello, am I audible to you,
Yes,
everyone?
yes.
Anyone?
Very much. Very much.
Yeah, thank you, Balaji sir, for such an informative presentation. The presentation itself explained in the starting that what is the research, and it is very well explained by you that it is a investigation to generate new knowledge. So, for the benefit of humanity, for the benefit of society, a few things also you have covered that how the literature should be and how the research should be. It should be the acquiring of knowledge, collection of different data such as primary data and secondary data itself, and the analysis part, the most important, the analysis part, the finding, and finally we are going to implement what we are going to implement, which is very lack in our Indian scenario also. That there is some problem in implementation, or you can say some action also need to be done after the research.
Correct.
So yes. So you have mentioned, you have highlighted the five things: the validity, reliability, replicability, testability, and generability. So these are the
Right.
five major things, which is the process to startup research. And you have also explained why how we can going to start our research from open source of courses such as Coursera, edX, Nepter, Swam. Itself explained these are the small courses, open courses for everyone, and it should be very beneficial for the research action also. Yeah, I hope this presentation is very well explained and very well implemented by our participants. There are some questions. Let me ask you one question, sir. Hello, are you audible?
Please,
There's a
please.
one question in my mind. How we have, so you have explained the five process of things such as viability, reliability, and so on. How we
Yeah.
are going to check the reliability in our research? By
Reliable.
statistical reading, by using the statics, how we are going to check the reliability of our research.
Are you asking me from the perspective of a researcher, my reliability, or somebody who is reading my research?
No, sir, I'm like asking for this person who is doing research and how is
Research.
going to check his reliability of that research. If he's doing research and you want to check the reliability, whether he is wrong or right, or how much data is correct,
Yeah.
and what is the simple process.
Yeah, sometimes the data is so very clear that suppose if we are researching on a phenomena and a lot of interviews you go on collecting confirms the fact you are concluding, and you repeat it to numerous cases and then it saturates at a point that it confirms the cases, we can be sure of what we are saying. Sometimes we need to use a method called triangulation. If we are not sure what we are concluding from one method, then we have to repeat, we have to answer the same question using another method which is diagonally opposite to it, and then third method. So all the methods, if they point to the same conclusion, then it is, we can reasonably consider it to be correct. So it's called triangulation in technical terms. I didn't go into all these technical aspects I was presenting. So when methods are used, or suppose let's say I am doing one experiment with one particular population, one sample set. I repeat the same exercise with another sample set population, the third population set. When all the three population sample sets yield to the same result, then we can again be sure of what we are doing. So these are some ways. These are not the only ways of being sure, but these are some immediate measures which we undertake when we want to be sure that our method is reliable.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Over to Pranay. Uh, Pranay, you can take it.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Balaji, sir, for this wonderful session. Uh, many
Thank
of
you,
the
Brian.
many of the students are over here. They realize the importance of this research and development in our country, because on the global index, as I can see, we stand at a very, if we consider population of our country, so considering that we are on the very low base of this research and development sector. So there's a lot of research to be carried out in our country in terms of architecture planning or integrating some technological things in our ancient monuments and ancient technologies also. So those are the things. But I have one question. I might sound silly in this
Yeah,
question, but
please.
at many times when students go for some research, I mean, if they belong to first year, second year, third year, they're not that much mature in their speaking or their communicating skills in architecture and
Yeah.
planning or in any other division, I guess. So, what is your take on that? I mean, how you want the student to deal with those people who don't consider them as a researcher? I mean, whether student in a first year or he is in bachelor's, if he is in a first year or in the final year, or he's doing PhD or masters, sometimes some people are very rude and don't consider them to be a researcher because in their mind what is researchers image in their mind is they have gray hairs, right? They have some experience, after that they do some research, but
Yeah.
some people
So
yeah
we
so
cannot underestimate the experience.
right
But then the whole point of today's talk was everybody can contribute.
yes
Please
I,
finish
yes
your question.
but that's what my question is, how you want the student to deal with those kind of people who has that image of a researcher in their minds, in their heads. So how the student should deal with that perception of those people.
See, Pranay, in my experience, what I have seen is people, if they are really a senior researcher who are well experienced, well published, they don't have that attitude of I am the one.
Right.
People who are having that probably not worthy of worthy of what they claim to be.
Right.
So people really achieved who are well published, well successful in their research, they are the most humble people I've ever seen.
Exactly.
You know, so it is generally very easy to talk to them and learn from them and all that. Having to answer your question of how some people are not confident in communication, some people don't see themselves as research.
Right.
There are two things I want to point out here. Generally, because of lack of awareness in education institution about orienting students towards research is one of the concerns we have. I think one of the solution, if not for immediate now, present, targeting the future 10 years from now, a decade from now, we should start creating the awareness in all institutions how important research is, and orienting research should become, inquiry should become become central part of our education. Critical thinking should become central part of our education. So that has to be cultivated so that students develop that attitude of everybody has the right for research. That is the whole title of this. The attitude should be developed in from the institution. That is when it will happen from schools. Not, I'm only not talking about BArc or engineering college. I'm talking about some from schools. People have to get that idea in their mind. You have to put it in the minds of children that everybody has right to knowledge, everybody has right to access and contribute to knowledge. That may solve part of the problem a decade from now. The second thing is, I'm sure everybody is not going to be good irrespective of anything. Everybody is not going to be good in research as well as tools, as well as communication. It applies to all of us. Everybody is, we have to identify our strengths. We should remember, we are never going to work individually, isolated in our entire life. All our operations are going to be in team. Hannah. So we have to identify our skills very well. If I am good in the research methods, I should play that role. I should team up with somebody who can communicate my ideas well. If I am good in softwares, I should team up with somebody who has experience of who can bring his experience to the platter. So I think it works with this kind of, first in creating awareness right from school. Second, by developing this attitude of teaming up. Often we also fail in that because we hesitate. It is my work. I am my, we don't give up that idea that, I can only be good in so much.
Right.
I need some.
Exactly.
So that is, I think I answered your question.
Yeah, yes, sir. Exactly. There's one more question from our audience. Vidya Sagar is asking, how do you identify or separate a research that is true and reliable from one that is not reliable or containing false information?
Okay. I think he says containing false information. So I assume that you're reading somebody else's research and then trying to figure out whether it is reliable or not. So in that case, we have to well-written paper, well-written publication, or well-written research article will have all the steps documented. That is one of the sign of a well-written paper. Everything, right from how the data was collected, what are the characteristics of data, describe it in entire detail. What were the tools used, how it was analyzed, how the conclusions were achieved. It will also say, well-written research will also say what are the loopholes in their own research. Now, if it is not convinced by that flow of what they are saying, you have all the rights to deny that research. I mean, research is supposed to do that. It has to clearly tell you what it is to a measure that you should be able to get that research paper and you should be able to replicate exactly the same. If you're not going to be, if it is not possible, then it is not a very reliable research, in my opinion.
Right.
It should be described, well done and well described.
All right. There's one more question from Vishnu. He's asking, is the use of illegal ways that enriches the quantitatively the research ethical? Objectively, it does not enhances the pool of information. For example, in certain religious places where photos are prohibited, is
Yeah.
smuggling of photos moral?
Yeah, no. I think that is a very important question. Absolutely. Because I did not talk about ethics of research in this forum because we were talking about access and we were talking about research for a fundamental introduction of research. I did not talk about ethics of research. It is a whole subject in itself.
Right.
Ethics of research is a very, very important area because clicking a photograph of somebody without their permission, clicking a photograph even of a building without the permission of the owner is not ethical.
Right.
I am talking about sharing of information, considering all these ethics are taken in. Thank you for that question, Vishnu. I think Vishnu asked this, right?
Right.
So thank you for the question because I think it gave us an opportunity to talk about research ethics. Research ethics is very important. It's not only for clicking photograph. In fact, if you go abroad in India, still research ethics when it comes to architecture schools and all that, it is still not so formalized. We just go around with the students and click anywhere, whatever photographs we want. We map things, we steal data. Literally, it is stealing data from people. It is violation of their rights, other person's right. We cannot do it. Even in other countries, there are very strict ordinances. Suppose if you go to the US, even for conducting an academic exercise, you have to pre-apply in the government bodies which approves whether you have to apply with the details of what data you are going to collect, what are the questions you are going to ask, what photograph you are going to click, which community you are going to. You need to make a complete documentation, send it to the government official, which gets approved, get the approval, and then you go and conduct the research. This is not happening time being, at least in all the departments in India. I'm sure medical department has some very serious ethical concerns, and their similar departments have ethical concerns. So they go through all the ethical practice. But it is a need of the hour. India must have these guidelines, ethical guidelines. Governmental system should be in place for all these. Moreover, whether there is a system in place or not, as the participant rightly pointed out, every participant must be available. Every researcher must be aware of the ethics of research. It's an entire subject for another discussion. I believe.
Yeah,
Thank you for the question.
we can keep that topic for another session also because it is very interesting and very less people know about the ethics of research and development. Right. So, is there any question?
So even I have a question. Even
yeah,
I
sure,
have a
Aditi, you can
question.
ask.
Yeah. So, sir, as we have researched in some or the other way, a small research or a research paper or something like in our career as of now, we have, as what I have experienced is that there is enormous amount of research data that is present in each domain that we can look for. So the major hurdle that I come across is how to find the actual gap that exists in the area of my interest so that I can carry the research in that direction. So the major concern is how to find that gap. So as you were mentioning various softwares and techniques and tools. So is there anything that can help me in identifying that gap?
If you, of course, there is no shortcut to it, I would say. There you have to, we have to go through database rigorously. Mostly, one of the ways to know it is perhaps it comes naturally to us when we are day in and out, we are familiarizing ourselves with the subject. That is where one of the areas I said subject domain knowledge is very important. If I want to be a serious architecture researcher, day one onwards, we should try and familiarize as much as possible what is happening in the field, which 10 years later, I would have a corpus of knowledge where I would know, because I'm continuously following various journals, I'm following various forums, I'm attending conferences. That is where attending conferences play a major role. Publishing in journal plays a major role, because you send a paper to a journal will simply reject your paper if it is an already existing research. We have to be and sending it to journals, so we will know the communication happens there, like a Facebook thread. So we have to keep going to conferences and keep presenting our new ideas. Then the participants will tell us what they are doing in their areas. So there is no shortcut. This comes from a long period, reading, lot of reading from books and journal articles and all that. However, for a quick initial search, if you are new to the area, I had. Can you hear me?
Yes,
I think
sir.
my screen is.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
I can
So
hear
if you are new to that area, that's why in one of the resources I had listed the search engines. If you remember, Google
Yes,
Scholar,
sir.
IBM's, all these search engines, which are a very good go-to places, because 150 million articles and all these you saw in that, are stored in those databases. They are research databases. They are not simple Google search. You get research articles. Shodh Ganga, thousands of thesis which is generated in India is documented free for you to download and read and use it. I mean, provided you give attribution to the person. We should be morally responsible for doing that. But then you have access to all this research. Millions of articles you can, from your desktop you can go to. Patent search, I told you about Google Patent, Google Trend, Google Analytics. This sort of initial, if you're a beginner, initially this will give you a major idea of what is happening. But nevertheless, we cannot underestimate the power of familiarizing ourselves with the subject knowledge by attending conferences, publishing in journals, going and reading in libraries. So combination of this will help us
Thank
do
you,
all
sir. Thank you so much.
I believe. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank.
So I think,
Is
is there
there
any
anyone?
question from the audience? If you have any question, you can ask. You can just type in the chat box. Yeah, there's a question from Anirudh. He's asking if that's true. Don't you think that ties and researchers by not giving
Okay.
the freedom of research and by extension reducing the interest of aspiring research? Or do you think researching in spite of the above increases the credibility? So it doesn't matter the right number of researchers over the quality.
Can you summarize? I
Yes,
could not get
I
the question.
think uh, Anirudh, can you
Is it
repeat
about
your question, please?
he can speak?
Sir, yeah, I was asking the
Yeah.
when we have so many restrictions that is put on by the government and this thing by doing the
Yeah.
research, don't you think that the number of researchers going forward, aspiring research, the numbers reduce and the interest in them, or do you think that the quality of the research takes precedence over the number of researchers that are going to come or uh,
Okay, I got your question. So you are saying, assuming that because of the restrictions, people are taking back from research. First of all, I don't think if it is true, if it is really true, there are restrictions because of lack of awareness. There are people going down. Number of researchers are lesser because probably because there are lack of awareness. and lack of access to resources. That is one primary concern. But just because government has some restriction, I don't think people are going down. Even though if we say restriction, what kind of restriction are we talking about? If it is ethical restriction, there is no second thought. The ethical restrictions must be there because it threatens the fundamental rights of the participants and other people. So restrictions on ethics part is quite justifiable. I don't think because of that researchers are going to go down. Number of researchers are important, which will grow by creating more awareness and giving more access to free tools and laboratories and opportunities. More opportunities that will increase number of researchers. Anyway, every young researcher is going to work with a team. So there are people to take care of all sort of official formalities. So one will learn. I think I don't think restrictions by government is going to reduce number of research. Opportunities will increase. Hope I answered you.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he asked the same question that I was asking him. How a student, I mean, in our field, many of the officials don't allow student in their premises or to photograph anything. Uh, so how to deal with those persons? I think his question was related to that only.
Okay. So I hope that is answered, right?
Yes, it was answered. It is answered, sir.
Yes, sir. Hello.
Yes, Anirudh, we can hear you. You have any more question? Any more question from everyone?
Yeah, he's saying thank you, I guess.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the question, Anirudh.
There's one more question from I cannot pronounce your name. Baranidharan.
Okay. Bharanidhar.
Baranidharan. Okay, all right.
Okay.
In the early part of your presentation, you mentioned that patent restrains people from getting the information. And in the later part of the presentation, you also mentioned young researchers and students should have patent awareness. So, how do we negotiate between patenting a research and the researchability of the information to all?
Patent, patent is nothing but it gives you right to not to manufacture something which is your original invention for commercial sake. I mean, it's a very interesting question. I understand what he is trying to say. He's trying to ask if it is like a copyright or patent, if it is protected. How can you give the knowledge, increase accessibility? So what you must understand, I think this patent and copyright itself, as I said during the presentation, is a matter of subject matter of another whole session. It is that huge a session, but I will tell you what it is. Patent and copyright exist for protecting the interest of researchers and to promote research. They are not by nature, they are not restrictive. If we are aware of it, if we understand how it works. The patent, you are specifically asking about patent, so I will tell you about patent. Any invention, if you have an invention, suppose you made a software equipment, say an app and an equipment to predict some kind of a climatic effect on building, let's say. So you want to patent this electronic. So you patented it. It gives you a sort of right to earn money. It does not protect anybody from accessing the knowledge. Tomorrow, what patenters do generally is you patent this, it protects your infringement rights. I mean, nobody tomorrow can manufacture without paying a royalty to you. So you can sell the patent. See, today there is a huge business around patent that people only do inventions and patent and then sell the royalty rights sell the rights to the manufacturers, and they pay royalties to the inventor. So inventor doesn't really manufacture. But what the patenter does is that to invent, patent it and publish it. The publishing phase of patent really documents and tells what is the invention about, what has gone into it, what were the steps, how was it exactly manufactured, which means the knowledge is out there. Whoever wants to improve this app, he cannot only reproduce it without your permissions. But one can take the knowledge of the publication of the patent and then he can improve the app or improve the device, and he can patent that. So that is always possible. Suppose bulb, I have invented a electric bulb long before done, but then for a simple example, I invented an incandescent electric bulb. I patented it, but parallelly I published how it was done. Somebody reads my research, he has access to research, but he cannot sell without my permission. That is the only thing patent restricts. For 60 years of inventor's life, not beyond that. After 60 years, it is all public domain. So after 60 years, no invention in India has patent, right? Anybody can sell it.
Right.
For that, yes, one can read the paper and he can develop incandescent bulb. Then he can say, quoting this research, he can say that patented product consumes so much energy. I have made another bulb which consumes 30% less energy. Now I am going to patent this, and he publishes the paper. Now there is no stopping for research knowledge. It is an open access again. Only the product protects the royalty rights, so you can earn money from. I hope I answered your question. Yeah. Even copyright, because this question came, I just want to make another point. Copyright also, copyright protects and reserves all your rights. Even if you make a simple sketch or a drawing, architectural drawings from offices can also be copyrighted. Buildings can also be copyrighted. Many of people don't know this, even in practice. It can be copyrighted or registered also with a registered trademark. But all these rights, whatever you copyright, your writing, your product, your artwork, everything is only until after the author's life, 60 years more for copyright. Then it becomes public domain. Anybody can use it. Anybody free of cost without permission can use it. So for patent, it is within the lifetime of author from the invention time period 60 years from now. So this is the time period where the copyright and patent laws will keep it binding only for the royalty sake, not for anything else. Information can still be shared. Okay.
Anyone else has any question? You can just unmute your mic and ask the questions also. I think it's a lot of time. I don't think there's any question from anybody. Okay, all right. I think we can conclude it over here. We can conclude this session.
Sure.
Yeah, Aditi, are you there?
Yes, Pranay, I'm here.
Yeah, you can continue. Aditi.
Okay, so I guess we are done with the questions for today. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, Aditi.
Okay, so thank you so much, Balaji sir, first of all, for such a great evening. It was informative, it was engaging, and it really took me back in time when we were at SPA. And it was great hearing you again. And we hope we'll
Thank
connect
you.
with you again very soon. And I also want to thank all our participants for being patient and for listening to all of us. Am I audible?
Yes, audible.
Okay, so I would like to thank all our participants for attending the webinar, and we hope to see you soon again at the next event that we have planned for you all again. And please send us your feedback. It's very important for us to know what you feel about the presentations, and if you have any queries, you can send the email ID or on Instagram. And do stay in the loop, and that's all for today.